So got another guitar here with a little fret sprout. It's not major. I get a lot like this where they've just had a little bit of exposure to dry weather, and you rub your fingernail along the edge and you can feel just a little bit poking out there, just enough to maybe make it uncomfortable. It'd be nice to knock it down before I do the setup on it. You can do this fairly quickly. The more you do it, the faster you get at it. First off, I'm not going to tape off the neck. That's the first question most people ask me. If you do 50 or 100 of them, you start to get to know how the file feels on the edge of the neck, and you can feel whether you're hitting wood or not. And it's just something you listen for and feel in your hand. And if you're careful, you can easily get away with doing this without hurting the neck or marking it up badly, and not having to tape it off. It saves a lot of time, and I don't have a lot of time right now. This is that StewMac. It's a leveling file, but you can use it for this too. This is a one direction file, by the way. You don't go back and forth, you go one direction with it. First thing you're going to do is just start going down the edge of this fretboard. This particular one, these frets are not sticking over much. I can see I'm already starting to hit wood. So I'm really not going to do too many passes with this at all. Where we're really going to fix this up is using the, again, StewMac, the fret end file. And the way we do this, first, just what I like to do, this is kind of optional, but I take the flat side of the file and just make 3 or 4 passes. I'm going with the angle of the bevel, and I'm just making sure there's no more metal sticking over the edge. Even though we're supposed to have dealt with that in this process, I still find there's still some little sticking over sometimes. So I do that. Then I flip it over to the non-safe side of this, which is the flat side. And what we're doing here is we're knocking down those sharp edges on the fret that are really what catch your finger. So non-safe file, side down, about a 45-degree angle to the fret, and you really only need to do about 4 passes. This is one of those things where I've learned over time, less is more. I used to do it too much. Okay, so maybe 4 or 5 passes depending on the frets. Now we flip it over to the rounded side of this file. This is the safer side. You don't have to worry about marking the neck here. And you just kind of feather over the end. Again, about 4 or 5 passes. And then you can bonus, try and go up on top of the fret a little bit to even round it more. Done. And you can get this done pretty quickly. Okay, knock it off with the non-safe side. Now flip it over to the safe side. About 4 passes maybe. Yeah, and it's just smoothing out those rough, kind of sharp ends. After this, we're going to do some sanding, and that's what kind of really brings, if you want to use your finger on the end of it, sometimes it'll slip and you'll mark the fretboard, so this kind of gives you a little more control. Don't go too fast. I'm showing it fast because I've done this enough. Take your time if possible, because you don't want to mark up the fretboard unnecessarily. In this process, I'm doing little tiny marks, maybe made little tiny marks on the wood of the fretboard, but that's going to all get smoothed out in the next part when we sand. I'll turn off the camera, finish the treble side, and then we'll sand it. And by the way, just a note, I do a lot more work on the treble side of the neck than I do on the bass side, simply because that's where your hand really feels this the most. I may do a couple quick little things on the bass side, but often I can skip it all together depending on how bad the frets are. Really focusing on the treble side. because that's where your hand feels it. I've done the whole side of this neck with the fret end file. Now you want to take some types of abrasives. You can start with something like, I use all kinds of things. These are just fret erasers. Just kind of starting to smooth those ends out. This is the final step to really get them smoothed out, knocked out. We've knocked off any metal hanging over the edge of the fretboard, and we've rounded the ends where they used to be kind of sharp. And now this final step fixes any little imperfections you might have made with the file, and it also just really smoothed out the end of those frets. I like to use WD-40 as a lubricant. People freak out when I tell them that, but you know what? It works for me. You can use Windex, you can use water, you can use some kind of mineral oil probably. WD-40 is the best thing as a lubricant for me. Put a little bit on these StewMac micro mesh sanding pads, and I just go through the grits real quick. Like, you don't have to spend too long with each grit, and you don't want to overdo it, because then you start to get little U-shapes in between the frets. You're just doing enough to go through the grits and really smooth them out. And these grits on these micro mesh pads are real high, so these are getting nice and buttery and smooth now. Just a few passes with each grit. Some people ask me, why do you start with such high grit? Well, that's just what seems to work. I don't need to go any lower than about 2500 to start. If you've done your filing right, and you haven't made a mess of those fret ends, then you really don't have a lot of harsh sanding to do. You're just smoothing out little tiny marks at this point, and these micro mesh pads will do that. Also I like to use this StewMac three-sided or three different grit kind of emery board looking thing, because it just allows you to get these at all angles. It's bendable, and you can go back and forth on it like this. And this last grit again on this one is 12,000, so you're just really just making them super smooth and fine at the end there, that super fine grit. Yeah, and that is about done with that, and that took me maybe 15 minutes. So you can do this, it doesn't have to take you all day, and the more you do it, the quicker you'll get at it. And I'm not saying to rush, I'm just saying if you're somebody who does a lot of setups like me, this can be done without having to tape up the entire neck, and it can be done safely without hurting the guitar. And especially for these cases where this has just got a little bit of the fret sprout, it's not horrible, you can just knock it out quickly, and that feels great. I'm not going to show it on camera here, but the last thing I'll do will be clean the fretboard and then really polish these frets. And when you put a little fret polish like this semi-chrome polish, and you get not just the frets, but while you're at it, you're getting the ends. It's just another final piece of the puzzle that really gets them super sweet. Let's see, that one's just been polished. And those fret ends are nice, just lightly rounded now, and not sharp to the touch. It's night and day, man. Night and day when you got some fret sprout. If you're like me and you do a ton of setups, this is a pretty cool little tool. It's a Dremel 2050. It's a little plug-in Dremel, really tiny. You can just put your fret polish on the frets and then run this across them super quick like. And it makes polishing frets super fast. And because we just treated the end of these frets, I'll even take it and go like this lightly along the ends. Just really getting those fret ends nice and smooth, polished. And then just wipe off any excess finish and you're done. And after this, I'll oil the neck and this beauty will be feeling so nice and smooth. Wow.